Hi, Greg Whitmore from Tidy Mountain Wellness. Thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to talk about autoimmune diseases. Why? Because I have one. I'm going to share my story about how I stumbled upon the diagnosis of an autoimmune disease for a couple reasons. One is maybe some of you will recognize the same symptoms that you may be experiencing, and maybe that'll give you an idea and talk to your doctor, and maybe they can do some testing and see if you might have an autoimmune disease. But maybe more importantly, I'm going to talk about how I came upon knowing that I had an autoimmune disease and how that led me on a path towards learning more about nutrition. It led me to intermittent fasting, which ultimately, I don't know about cured my autoimmune disease, but certainly I don't take any medication for it anymore. So that's what's really led me to create this YouTube channel, focus on nutrition, which, as you know, is top of Whitmore's Big Five, but also nutrition. Through nutrition and the pattern of intermittent fasting, I no longer take medication for it. So let's talk about autoimmune diseases. I knew nothing about autoimmune diseases before 2010, and I'll start with that story in a few minutes. But did you know there's over 100 autoimmune diseases? Some of the more popular ones are Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, lupus, type 1 diabetes can be an autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and polymyalgia. Maybe you've heard of some of those. I'm going to share a link in the description below of the list of autoimmune diseases. Some you will have heard, and many you will not have heard of. So what is an autoimmune disease? I really didn't know much. I think I had heard about it a few times before 2010, but obviously one of the functions of our immune system is to attack foreign invaders. It recognizes maybe a virus or a bacteria, some kind of pathogen gets into our system, and our immune system goes to work attacking that. Well, for some reason, the immune system gets fooled once in a while, and it starts attacking its own cells or its own body. So that's how mine started. And really, mine started in 2010. I was over visiting my mom before Christmas. We slept on her guest bed, and I woke up one morning and really just kind of had a stiff neck. But you know what? That had happened dozens of times when I'd been out on the road at hotels speaking or at conferences, so I really wasn't that concerned. A little pain, stiffness, I knew in a few days it'd probably go away. But unfortunately, this time it didn't go away. In fact, it continued to get worse. I had pain in my shoulders, down an arm, and it continued to get so intense that I couldn't sleep in my own bed. I'd stay down in our basement in a lazy boy and maybe get 20 minutes of sleep before I'd have to kind of stand up and move my shoulders. There's no way I could lay down flat in a bed. So that went on about a month, and I was getting depressed and tired and really affecting all parts of my mental health as well. Finally, I got to the point where I decided, even though I'd never been to a chiropractor, I decided to go seek some help from a local chiropractor. And after some x-rays, he thought that possibly he could help me. And I went to 5 treatments, and each time I tried to trick myself into thinking that things were better, but I still had this intense pain in my neck, down my shoulders. I went to my personal physician. He ordered some x-rays, and nothing was really conclusive. Then an MRI showed a little bit of maybe deterioration or arthritis, but I was convinced that I had some nerve in my neck that was being impinged upon, causing pain down my leg, arm, shoulders. But it was getting so intense, I just was really wanting to find out what it was, and if it was surgery that I needed, I didn't care. I just wanted that to happen. So after the MRI, I made an appointment with an orthopedic surgeon, and when I finally got to that point, I was almost excited to hear him say the words, or hoping he would say the words, that we're going to operate on you. We're going to fuse your discs or your vertebrae so we don't impinge upon that, and you're going to be healed. Even though I knew it meant going in through the front of my neck and fusing the bone, and a lot of rehab and sort. I just needed the pain to go away. I was that desperate. So my wife and I were in the orthopedic office, and the doc comes in and looking at my MRI, he says, "Greg, I don't think you have an orthopedic problem. I don't see any major impingement on a nerve that would cause this much pain and suffering." He says, "Possibly you have an autoimmune disease." Of course, at that point, I had no idea what an autoimmune disease was, and I was almost disappointed that I wasn't going to go into surgery here in the next couple days to relieve the pain. But he said, "Here's what we're going to do. We don't know exactly what autoimmune disease you may have, but you're having some of the same symptoms as polymyalgia or arthritis. Could even be multiple sclerosis," which was a word I didn't really want to hear. But what he did do is he prescribed prednisone. He prescribed 60 milligrams of prednisone, ordered me down to the lab, took 4 vials of blood, and home we went. Now that day, as an athletic director, I was supposed to go to work and set up for a basketball game, so I had my wife go down and fill the prescription. I was still in intense pain, couldn't move very much. She brought the prescription of prednisone back to me, and I took 60 milligrams, and within an hour and a half, I was like a new man. The pain had gone away. That indicated that, sure enough, the doc was right. I had an autoimmune disease. And yet, after 3 months of pain and suffering, it was a relief to know what it was, or at least that I had an autoimmune disease, even though I didn't know which one of those 100 it was. But after 3 months of pain and suffering, it was a little bit of a relief. Still, I had an autoimmune disease. Now, unfortunately, the blood tests were inconclusive. It didn't tell me exactly what autoimmune disease I had. The doctor suspected polymyalgia. It really fit the symptoms consistent with polymyalgia. Furthermore, he said, you know, it probably doesn't really matter the exact diagnosis because you're going to have that. They typically don't go away. You're treating them maybe for the rest of your life. That was a little bit disheartening because I was on 60 milligrams of prednisone, and if you know anything about prednisone, it's not a great medication to be taking in large amounts, and yet I needed to treat my symptoms. I'd never taken medication before other than the occasional Tylenol or cold medicine or that sort of thing, so that wasn't a very fun thought, knowing that I could possibly have to take medication the rest of my life. Luckily, we worked our way down 60 milligrams, down to 50 milligrams, and 40, 30, 20. Got to the point where I was managing the pain and symptoms pretty well, and even sleeping in my bed with 10 milligrams a day. After a little while, I got it down to 5, and still managing it pretty well. So I got to the point where I said, you know what, I'm going to try not taking any prednisone for the next few days. And sure enough, symptoms didn't return. So after about a year and a half of taking prednisone, the autoimmune disease disappeared, went away, or so I thought. But I went the next 2.5 years without taking any prednisone, symptom-free, getting along just fine. One morning though, I kind of felt some arthritis-type pain in my fingers, little referred pain down one of my legs, and I thought, uh-oh, this isn't very good. Waited, the next day it got a little bit worse, got a little bit worse. That's when I knew, and I called my doctor and I said, Doc, it's back. So back to 60 milligrams, weaning myself down, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. Even tried going without prednisone a couple times like I did before, but I never got to the point where I could get off prednisone. I was managing it pretty well with 10, sometimes 5 milligrams, but I didn't want to be on prednisone at all. I didn't want to be on any medication. So I pretty much resigned myself to possibly having to take 5 to 10 milligrams of prednisone to treat my autoimmune disease for the rest of my life. At my yearly physicals, luckily my doctor would monitor my blood tests and all my numbers came in really, really healthy, really normal. So he said, I know you don't want to take prednisone, but so far it's not affecting you. But again, I don't want to take any medication. Who knows the long-term effects? So maybe some of you might recognize those symptoms in yourself, and I'd encourage you to talk to your doctor about possibly looking into seeing if it might be an autoimmune disease. I had a good friend that was talking to me about the pains in his shoulders not long after I'd been diagnosed, and I said, you might have what I had, which is an autoimmune disease. And sure enough, he went to his doctor, and that turned out to be what he had. So that's part of the reason for sharing my story, is maybe you recognize some of these symptoms in your own situation. But what I really want you to do is check out my next video. In that video, I share how through nutrition and a pattern of eating called intermittent fasting has allowed me to not take any medication, and I've never felt better in my life. So I'll put a link to that in the description below, but make sure you check that out, because that is really the driving force as to why I've started this YouTube channel, why I think nutrition is so important, and why I think intermittent fasting is the way to go. Thank you, and we'll see you in that next video.